Sir Denis Mahon was one of the most distinguished art historians and collectors of the 20th century and a determined campaigner and philanthropist. His legacy to us all is maintained through his charitable foundation, the Sir Denis Mahon Charitable Trust, which continues Sir Denis's philanthropic work, his support to museums and galleries, his art historical research, the promotion of his collection to the general public, and the support of young and up-and-coming artists, students and scholars. He endowed a prize at the Royal Drawing School, which is awarded to a graduate of the Royal Drawing School who has excelled in their drawing studies, a skill which the Prince of Wales has sought to re-establish through his own charity of the Drawing School. The Sir Denis Mahon Essay Prize was established by Sir Denis's friends and colleagues in 2010 in honour and celebration of his 100th birthday. After Sir Denis's death in 2011, it is now his charitable trust which runs the Essay Prize. Other projects involve supporting causes close to Sir Denis's heart, such as helping smaller museums and galleries to organise exhibitions. Recent exhibitions include Caravaggio, Fashion and Fabrics at the Museum of the Order of St. John, and Bici Visconti, drawings and sketchbooks from the Great War, shown at 48 Millbank, London, and travelling to the National Gallery of Ireland later this year. Ongoing projects include the placement of Sir Denis's archive and library at the National Gallery of Ireland in Dublin.
As an art historian, Sir Denis Mahon naturally referred to the past, but he was forward-thinking, and he was always a free spirit. He was interested in progress and new technology and kept abreast with the passage of time and changes he witnessed in his long life by maintaining an open mind. He was aided by students and scholars who would send their mountains of essays, which he would pile on his desk to read and correct, which kept him busy and young. Sir Denis's passion for art was focused on 17th century paintings, especially Italian, yet he was intrigued by pre- and post-war artists, many of whom he befriended, such as Graham Sutherland, Harry Moore, Stanley Spencer, Edoardo Paolozzi, and Giorgio Morandi, whom he used to visit together with Cesare Nudi during his many periods in Bologna, where he estimated he had spent approximately half of his life. In the spirit of Age of Future Reloaded, Sir Denis's legacy lives on. His charitable trust continues his work and supports his interest. Being very free-spirited, Sir Denis loved young scholars, always supported students, and never lost his curiosity for discoveries. We are delighted to promote the Bologna-based TECHNO MEDIOEVO and its association, Age of Future. We are grateful to Professor Marcello Pecchioli, who, like a Ruskin of modern times, has introduced this interesting brotherhood of artists to us. We could not forget the scientific community of young academics from Imperial College and the University of Cambridge, who had generously contributed to the catalogue with their fascinating essays. We are indebted to Flattime House and to his director, Gareth Bell-Jones, and honored to present this exhibition in homage to the great post-war conceptual artist John Latham, whose language of time remains a most important inspiration for experimental, controversial, and avant-garde great art.
The Museum of the Order of St. John covers a 900-year period of history. It begins with the Crusades and spans through times of change to the present day. In working with TECHNO MEDIOEVO, Age of Future Reloaded, the museum is able to explore a new dynamic, one that covers the ancient and also the modern. In displaying these contemporary pieces alongside original pieces from the museum's collection, we're able to explore new relationships and present something that engages viewers in a very different way.
I am Marcello Pecchioli, creator and coordinator of TECHNO MEDIOEVO project. The project was conceived at least a decade ago in seminar and university courses between the Department of Architecture of Ferrara, the Dams Art University of Bologna, and the Dams Cinema University of Padova, as well as in numerous fine arts academy, from Brera to Venice, from Sassari to Catanzaro. I have collaborated at all these places in recent years. The transformation of the project into an exhibition is more recent. Initially, we published Chronicle from TECHNO MEDIOEVO, a collection of essays that I edited. This was then followed by a string of exhibitions in Italy. The first of these, Fashion Tech, was held in Milan at Multimedia Bar Le Biciclette. Next came an exhibition called Please Me Fashion, which was held in the Palazzo Ducale at Sabioneta, Modena. More recently, there have been two exhibitions dedicated to the TECHNO MEDIOEVO, one of the Museum of Natural Science, Torino, in 2013, and another at Arte Fiera in 2014, held at Palazzo Grassi, Bologna. I'm a philosopher of science and a teaching professor at the University of Bologna. I specialize in new media and technological aesthetics, and I am a film and multimedia critic, a dramatist and essayist, as well as curating special projects for various film festivals in Italy. I have also been the artistic director of a festival dedicated to science fiction, ufology, and border science, the EBA, which has been held 3 times so far. In addition, I am also an author and artist, videomaker and director. I participated in the Italian experimental photography movement of the 18th from its inception, and am currently the president of the Age of Future Association. I have also coordinated as team leader the birth of the robotic team that has been responsible for programming the humanoid robot Blue Storm for the last 2 years. Together with this robot, I manage the blog Robotic and Science Fiction within the Blue Storm site, bluestormrobot.com. As part of this project, we are also producing television formats with the robot, with the hope of someday making a robotic television program. The first format currently in production is a cooking show with the robot in the role of sous chef, which talks and interacts with chef. The robot discusses ancient and modern recipes, giving rise to new insight about food and the evolution of Italian cuisine.
Thank you, Professor Pecchioli. The artists you have selected for the London exhibition are all very individual, as we can see in their works on display here.
Will you please tell us about the artists, Professor Pecchioli, and how you selected them for the exhibition?
Okay. The London exhibition is the result of artists and authors working together in collaboration. The contributor presenting work here also worked on the Torino and Bologna catalogue and have been selected because of their excellence, their vision of the Middle Age and the Renaissance, and for the way their work cohere with the museum that hosts us. The selected artists belong to various generations, have very specific and varied skill and poetics, so they share some traits. They represent a symbolic universe and the poetics that are directly in touch with history and with new readings and recordings, artisanal, technological, multimedia of the great historical period mentioned here, the Middle Age and the Renaissance. The artists of the late Middle Age represent a crew, then an order or a lay congregation of men, women, skills and knowledge that moved incessantly from one place to another, from a village to a castle, to perform, sometimes simultaneously, the work of church construction, cathedral, stained glass window, jewels, tapestry, architectural and sculptural works in a sort of period network. They contributed to the creation of an entire pictorial cycle that would be seen and read by thousands of faithful and devoted people, such as the Biblia Pauperum, forging the minds, belief and symbolism, traits of sacred stories, usable by all the people, from noble to illiterate, from the monks and priests to the humblest of classes.
Gaetano Muratore was born on the island of Pantelleria and graduated as an expert in mechanics. Since childhood, he's dedicated himself to painting. Eventually, in 1980, he became a sculptor cum robot assembler, creating works that he defines as dreamy androids. These are made using waste materials and vintage objects. In 1988, he left his position of train conductor with Wagon Lit, the renowned historical operator of the Orient Express. Instead, he became a freelancer, combining his artistic career with the production of structural works, mainly in metal. Key installation projects have included Mobile Kids, which was a work for Daimler Chrysler Mercedes. He also created Ortocircuito at the Science Museum in Milan and made a Colombo furniture showcase there at Fiera Ro. Muratore's recent media events have included Ecolite with the Recycling Museum at Rimini Fair. Among his acclaimed exhibitions have been the Third Renaissance Show at Palazzo Ducale of Urbino in 2010 and the Biennale of Contemporary Art at the Flash Art Museum in Trevi, Perugia. Muratore has presented many shows in conjunction with the Age of Future Association. These include Please Me Fashion at the Palazzo Ducale in Sabbioneta and others at the Museum of Natural Sciences in Turin and the Bologna Art Fair. His latest work, The Night Crusader, was created specifically for Bologna. Crusader robot Teutonic Knight is the work that Muratore is proudly presenting at the Museum of the Order of St. John. It's an electromechanical robot which operates using electric components from refuse objects. The head is composed of 2 recycled pots combined with motorcycle parts. The body is a wall safe merged with an old cash register. And what we have here is the Holy Grail. The arms and hands are built with the recovered tubes of a folding chair, and the legs are made through combining the arms of external awnings with the suspension of an old car. These components are all held together by welding and joining scrap iron and other metals. The robot moves its head and launches itself in a gesture of greeting. The small stainless steel Crusader page is the robotic sensor that activates the Great Knight.
I began to exhibit at the national level since 1986. I participate in the artistic current named medialism, theorized by the art critic Gabriele Perretta from the early 90s. Part of my work is shown in a public collection: Bergamo Modern Art Gallery, Mambo, Bologna. Some of other are part of private collections. The work on show is inspired by the cycle of tapestries of the late 15th century, known under the title The Lady and the Unicorn, exhibited in the National Museum of Middle Ages in Paris. The tapestries show an environment of extreme beauty and elegance, in the center of which stands a lady with a unicorn, symbol of chastity, and a lion, symbol of strength. The tapestries are dedicated to the 5 senses, plus one mysteriously known as a Moncel désir. The painting with the black rabbit that I made is dedicated to the tact tapestry.
I was born in Assisi in 1982. Most of my life was devoted to art. I always been moved by curiosity, by knowledge, by wanting to test me. So at the age of 19, I found myself here in London. The period of study at the St. Martin School of Arts allowed me to acquire technique and experience. In a short time, I found myself working with great names in the English graphic and communication landscape. As a graphic and visual designer, I was deeply inspired. In Italy, I have continued to pursue my objectives, concentrating on experiments of making real what is not visible, which is within me. I have experimented, I always played with color, its three-dimensionality. That's how the first 3 collections were born, my first fruits. In the first, the masks, I focus a lot on symbology, on meaning, using the expressionless human face as the protagonist of a cycle of creation, evolution, vortex and social pyramids. Infinity, good and evil, regression, evolution are fundamental elements of our society. In vortex regression, the full mask sucks into a vortex, a vicious circle, which focuses not only on the passage of matter, but on a real transition from one world to another, although due to the human errors it goes back to the starting point. New individuals, humans, aliens, cyborgs, monsters and mutants come to life, animating worlds and events in a future that can still be changed. A fantastic story with unexplored but urbanized worlds. The repopulation of this place is also expressed through new births. So, surrogate mother is a maternity entrusted to an unknown species, which nourishes the fruits of an ancient civilized planet now gone, modifying its genetics. Just the scene of a nuclear war, a post-atomic environment, is what is found in the last night, first day, a cold dawn without the first rays of the sun. It immerses the ruins of a church in the dark nature. This is a baptism, an entry into society, an affiliation to an unknown cult. The condition of an old man is abandoned to embrace that of a new man. Survival is always the goal. For this respiratory way expresses the difficulty, this commitment of the new beings in a rarefied atmosphere. This mutant is stopped, paused. A return to life in a new form, and the only priority is to return to breathing. Precisely in this scenario, ancient pagan scenes return, with Sacrifice Square. We are inside a newly created city where the dark tones outline the drama of annihilation of the human will, now devoid of soul, form, and will. But the main work of my project is Ad Extirpanda, a symbolic geometric landscape in which the will of the new hierarchy is expressed. That is the domination of nature, now in rapid decline. On the right cliff, the condemned are afraid. The open mouth is in screams of terror. They are devoid of limbs. In the ditch, those who have already been executed have already lost all psychical characteristics. The executors on the left cliff observe the remarkable spectacle. The new society is a fallacious system devoid of compassion. This is precisely the central challenge, the demolition of categories of absolute and dictatorial power, negligence through logical and intelligent reasoning. My research over the years also extended to science and physics, spurred on by curiosity and numerous external stimuli. I began to create sketches of paintings and sculpture inspired by discussions and discoveries about black holes, gravitational collapse, the new dimensions. So between sketches and various prototypes, gravitational waves in black holes saw the light, a sculpture almost 2 meters tall that features the occurrence of gravitational radiation, placing at the center the collision between the black holes. This is a subject that fascinates me greatly, and I wish to pursue my research in an even greater artistic evolution.
Professor Pecchioli, you are a philosopher of science, a university professor, a cinematographic and multimedia critic, a writer, a filmmaker, an avant-garde visionary, and of course, the brain behind TECHNO MEDIOEVO and the Brotherhood. And you are also an artist.
Yes, on show there are 2 works of mine. Alien Pressed. This is stained glass window of 12 using medieval leading technique to depict an alien pressed in the historical posture of Christ Pantocrator. The work originates from a suggestion made in a science fiction novel, A Canticle for Leibowitz, by Walter Miller, written in 1950s. In this text, the author hypothesizes a rebirth of mankind after nuclear catastrophe that have undone the technological development of humanity, assisted by scientific tests that survived the destruction. These are initially treated as holy relics, incomprehensible to the churchmen of the time. Once, a new generation of scientist monks are able to read their scientific content again. These books allow the Church to build a new American Renaissance and revive human civilization. At this point, the Church replaced NASA and began an evangelical colonization of extrasolar planets. It is in this context that the work can be read, the depiction of an alien representative of evangelism priesthood, uniting precisely the 2 components which were central to the Techno Medioevo movement, the hybridation between new technology and the recoding of our historical past, the Middle Age and the Renaissance included. In the landscape behind the priest, we can see both the skyline, redolent of a medieval turreted city, and the shape of flying saucer. This is a symbol of conquest and exchange between terrestrial and alien civilization.
My name is Shuying. I'm a visual artist, mangaka, and photographer. I studied animation at the Northwest University in Xi'an, China, and graduated from the University of Padua, Italy, in the cinematographic studies and multimedia technologies. During my time in Italy, I had the chance to participate in various exciting projects, such as the Young Artist Projects, Progetto Giovani Artisti in Padua. I also document various events of the Artistic Association Age of Future, among them several art exhibitions and cultural events such as flash mob, dance shows, and robot-human interactions project. About my Han Dynasty design, my own work was exposed in several exhibitions across Italy, and I'm continuously collaborating with the Age of Future to develop new projects. My design of Han Dynasty princess was selected from the exhibition and is present in the catalog of the Museum of the Order of St. John. The design represents Chinese culture during the Han Dynasty, a period in the time that can be compared to the Western Renaissance. The reign of the Han Dynasty was a period of great economic, political, cultural, scientific, and technology progress brought significant development in various parts of China. Illustrated in a manga style, it represents two young women dressed in a traditional Han dresses. It symbolizes to so-called Hanfu Qujü style, which represents the elegance and femininity of women during the time. The two illustrated princesses are the concubines of Emperor Han Chengdi, as well as the most beautiful and famous sister during the Han Dynasty. The first sister is called Zhao Hede, the second one who eventually became queen. Zhao Feiyan gained great notoriety in China history, similar to Yang Guifei of the Tang Dynasty. To illustrate the beauty and the prosperity of the period, the manga style was chosen. Recent exhibition and studies have shown how manga have developed to become nowadays one of the most important and recognized graphic languages in the Far East. As such, it is used in most all Eastern countries to represent their history.
Mm-hmm. We pay tribute to this talented artist, Massimo Trenti, who sadly passed away a few days ago. His time capsule is the juncture of the entire curatorial path and almost serves as a guide to entering a kind of space-time breach. The work brings us back to 1910, the dawn of the new relativistic physics. This moment completely revolutionized our notion of physics, astrophysics and quantum physics, and it changed forever our imagination, our noosphere and our technological landscape. The artist's work is a box suitcase that contains artifacts from 1910, including fragments of Albert Einstein's formulas that, with his works from 1905, would change the face of physics forever and irreversibly. This box was packaged and sent by an early 20th century scientific curator at the Smithsonian Institute, who, having realized the potential of this young European scientist at the dawn of his scientific career, decided to communicate his astonishing discoveries to the next Universal American Expo of his time, held in Louisiana in 1904, but blatantly, this was the wrong date of its sending. The box suitcase was never delivered, and because of this, it enters a kind of space-time limbo and arrives with us in the present day in this exhibition. In this case, we are also faced with a clear homage to John Latham and Flat Time House, the artist's home studio, the director of which, Gareth Bell-Jones, has honoured us with an essay in the catalogue. This work by Trenti is a moving tribute to Latham, who sadly passed away in 2006.
But I'm going to be talking about a very different space that's in South London. And I work as the curator and director of the home of the conceptual artist John Latham. It's called Flat Time House. And this is the actual home where he lived from 1985 until his death in 2006. So John Latham was born in 1928 in Maramba in Zambia, or what was then called Livingstone in northern Rhodesia. And when he was living in Peckham, he would make his work in this space, he lived there, and he would invite his friends over and he would talk about art and serious issues. In 2003, this space ceased to be known as 210 Belden Road, and he named it Flat Time House. And he designated it a conceptual artwork, and he named the different spaces after different parts of the body. He anthropomorphized the space and called it a living sculpture. You can see the mind, brain, body event, and hand. So outside of the house, the most startling, unusual aspect is a large book sculpture that protrudes, is cantilevered through the front of the building. You can see there it's supported by the pane of glass. And then the first room that you enter is called the mind. As you progress through, you come to an office space. This is the space that I work in, and it also houses the John Latham Archive. You go into the corridor, in which he spray painted onto the walls the shift. And then you get to the body event. This is a kitchen and a living area, and there's an upstairs, which is a bedroom and a bathroom. It's the space where someone lives. In the back was where John Latham used to use as a studio, and this is the room that he called the Hand. So, and of course, we have studios out the back in the garden area. But the space didn't always look like this. This is the Hand in 2005, when John Latham still lived there. This is the body event. You can see it's kind of a tip. And this is one of his working areas in the shift. And you can see it's a real artist studio. It's a living, working space. But due to John Latham's thinking of time and the way that he approached heritage, it's actually conceptually important towards his legacy that we don't actually keep it as a time capsule, that it's not kept as a space for the preservation of the space as it was when he lived there, but rather it's a museum of his ideas and this complex notion which he called flat time towards the end of his life. In 2003, when the sculpture was installed, the mind, as he called it, became a space where he would invite people in, and people came from all over the world. So he was in correspondence with scientific figures such as Stephen Hawking, economists and philosophers like Noam Chomsky, musicians and artists. He was in close contact with John Lennon, Yoko Ono, all the Fluxus. And so he was really working in a lot of different fields and knew a lot of different figures, because he wasn't really interested in art as separate from society. He was interested in how art is positioned within society. And he opened this space up, and he would sit in this little camp chair, and for the last 3 years of his life, he would talk about this concept that he called flat time. It became a kind of pseudo-museum. And towards this, he selected 4 pieces of work from throughout his career, which he used almost as diagrammatic tools to describe flat time. And I keep on saying this word, I'm going to try and get there and explain it. But his work has often confused and befuddled many people. People find it difficult. And it's partly because he has worked in so many fields. He made sculpture and painting, installation, assemblage, land art, found art, conceptual art, instruction works. He did poetry. He did plays, performance. He even did an engineering project with the attempt of capturing energy from tidal energy. So he was really working in lots of different fields. But the first room in the space, and we often keep it as it was with these 4 works, it sometimes changes, was used to kind of talk about this notion of how he understood this cosmology. So I'm going to try to do something similar, but it has the caveat that John Latham would almost certainly disagree with how I'm presenting this. It's an intuitive idea, and so inherently by rationalizing it, I'm contradicting the whole notion of flat time. And also, if John Latham was still alive, he would have developed these ideas, and they would have changed by this point. In John Latham's ideas, nothing is static. So this first work is called Proto-Universe. And what you have here is a sheet of glass on the left and a white plane on the right. John Latham uses materials symbolically, and glass he started using in the late 80s, in 1987. This is a fish tank work, and this is one of his works from the 90s, from the God is Great series. And this work he made for this purpose of talking about his understanding of the universe. The sheet of glass is used symbolically to represent nothing, literally nothing, no time, no matter. But also, to make this more complex slightly, the atemporal. The white plane he used to represent what he referred to as the least event. This is the shortest duration that there can be. So this feels like a theoretical concept. There can always be a shorter duration, but there is an actual unit of time, which is the shortest unit of time in which general relativity operates. This is the duration that it takes for a beam of light to cross the diameter of an electron in a vacuum, and it's called a Planck time. Any duration below this, you get into the realm of quantum physics, and suddenly things can be in two places at once and can transport from the future to the past. If you're operating over the duration of a Planck time, then you're in the realm of general relativity, and things operate how humans relatively understand the world, this subjective human view. So what we have is a movement from nothing to a very small something. And John Latham ascribed to a model of the universe which isn't really popular now, but in the 80s and 90s was very popular, and this was the Big Crunch theory, in which from a Big Bang, the universe expands and expands and expands. It reaches a point of maximum extent and then begins to contract. So rather than one universe going from a Big Bang and extending, what you have rather is cyclical universes and infinite sequences of universes. So with this understanding of the universe, what you have with nothing is transformed, it changes. Rather than this nothing before a Big Bang, what you actually have is a non-dimensional point, a point of transition from one universe to the next universe. Does this sort of make sense? It doesn't matter if you're not totally getting it. A lot of artists in John Latham, they would say like he was the most influential, fascinating artist, but I've got no idea what he's talking about. So what you have with this transition point from one universe to the next, this is something that exists in the history of the universe, but John Latham thought this shift was something that also existed within other realms of human understanding. So in the history of science, the Big Bang, in the history of science, he thought the writing of the theory of relativity by Einstein was a paradigm shift. And in the history of art, he thought Robert Rauschenberg's white monochromes in 1951 was a paradigm shift, and he saw a relationship between the black hole and Robert Rauschenberg and John Cage emerging in the middle of the 20th century. And for John Latham himself, he thought there was a paradigm shift that took place in 1954. And this was when he was living in Hampshire, and he was working with two fascinating people, Clive Gregory and Anita Cozen. And Clive Gregory was an astronomer and the director of the London Observatory. Anita Cozen was a parapsychologist and animal behavioralist. And together they came up with a unifying theory of the universe that they called psychophysical cosmology. And they created a journal called The O Structure, and they invited John Latham to be involved in this new organization that they called the Institute for the Study of Mental Images. So this paradigm shift for John Latham occurred when he was involved in discussion with them. And he was fascinated by this idea of a universe that was understood according to time than according to objects and things, an event-based structure of the universe. And at Halloween in 1954, he had been doing work on the house using a spray gun. And when he was asked to do a mural for their Halloween party, rather than painting it in his style that he had always done, he instead used this spray gun that he'd been using around the house, and he made his first spray work. This is a different work from 1954 that gives you a sense. Formation. And so this work that we have at Flat Time House is one of his, what he called 1-second drawings, a point of spray. And you can think of this as an event. You can think of this as a least event, like the white plane. And what you have when you look closer is something that could be aesthetically, it could be the smallest particle in the universe, it could be the entirety of the universe, many galaxies in negative, or it could be a human cell under a microscope. And so what he wanted to do was conflate these different aspects of the universe together in one almost this tiny gesture, this tiny event. The next work that you get, the third work in the series, introduces a different symbolic aspect of John Latham's work, and this is the book. He called this work the Book Relief Triad from 2003, reconfigured from 1959. And what you have here is a book that looks partially destroyed, one kind of emerging from the canvas, and one that's completely blank. So these assemblage works he had been making in the 1950s, and he worked with them in different ways, partially destroying, cutting them, using paste to assemble them together. And he would change them, actively change them all the time. There's a really interesting story by this artist, John Stazeker. He said when he was young, he went to the Tate, and he saw this work by John Latham. This work, Film Star, it's still in their collection. It's on show at the moment. And he said, it's a different colour. And he went to the desk and asked, how come this work is a different colour to when I came in before? And the person at the desk got the curator. The curator came down and explained that sometimes the artists like to come into the space and change the pages of the book and change the colour of the work. And the Latham family still do this to reflect the different spaces that they're in. But the book for John Latham isn't just an aesthetic tool, it's also a symbolic object, like all materials are in his work. And it's symbolic of something he called received opinion. You can imagine this as being knowledge, human knowledge, or hierarchical forms of knowledge. There's a quote here from his time working as a tutor. Senior academic institutions have been defrauding the public and students for 300 years. They are not concerned with education, still less with the truth. They are run for the benefit of the staff. So he was quite a radical. And this is one of his radical gestures that he made in 1966. And this is a work that's in the MoMA collection, New York, called Art and Culture, Spit and Chew. And what he did was when he was working at Central St. Martin's, he got his students, who had been given the text by Clement Greenberg, the Art and Culture. This was essentially how you made artwork, and this was the home of Anthony Caro. And he got his students to take this and eat it. So the students ate the pages of the book. He got them to spit it out into a big vial, and he collected all the spit, added enzymes to it, and distilled it and refined it into a pure art and culture. He then returned it to the library, and the myth is that he got fired as a result. I think his contract just came to an end. And simultaneously, he was doing these other radical gestures. This is one of his Scoob Tower ceremonies, where he would take copies of the Encyclopedia Britannica, interleave the pages together till they became blocks, stack them, and then set them on fire. So this, in the aftermath of World War II, in the aftermath of the book burning by the Nazis, is an incredibly contentious act, but can be understood as a rejection of all of human knowledge that got us to the point that led to this. What John Latham is doing with these actions with books is saying, don't accept what you've been told, essentially. Don't just accept the received opinion that you grow up within. So with the book sculpture at Flat Time House, what you can see is that the two books, the pages have been interleaved together. And symbolically, what he's doing with this is rejecting any possible way of opening a book and accessing it and being able to read it in a narrative manner. You need to approach this in an intuitive manner. So to return to the book relief triad, what you have is 3 books in different configurations, 1 blank, 2 books rather, and these reflect different durations for John Latham. We're getting back to time again. And different states of human understanding, or ways in which humans interact with the world. They're named after 3 characters in Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov: Mitya, Ivan, and Alyosha. Mitya, the elder brother, was very, very short-tempered. He was very instinctive with his behavior. Ivan was very rational, and the younger brother, Alyosha, was very intuitive. So, for John Latham, rather than there being a left-right of politics, he was interested in what determines humans living in society. And it is, for him, instinctive actions, eating, sleeping, drinking, excreting, procreation to keep the species going, all the things that humans need to live and to keep the species going. Then there's rational thought. This is being able to communicate as I am now. Hopefully you can understand what I'm saying, more or less. And this is administration, bureaucracy. This is in a much longer duration for John Latham, not the short time frame of about a day, but this is a generation. This is about 30 years. And then what he thought was neglected in society was what he called reflective intuitive thought. And he thought that this was a much longer duration. And he thought that artists were somewhat capable of thinking in these longer terms. He didn't actually use the word artist. He used a term called incidental person. He didn't think this mode of thought was solely the domain of artists, but he thought that artists were particularly capable of this type of thought, of being able to think in such long modes of such long durations. So this brings me to the fourth work in this space, in the mind at Flat Time House. And this is one of John's roller paintings. This is one from 1987. So these works were initially, he just had to store his work somewhere, and they were rolled up all over the house. And then he started putting them on the windows as blinds, and he quite liked the fact that people saw them outside, and people in the house couldn't see them. And then he got fascinated by this bit at the top, where you could see a bit of the front of the canvas. And he started activating them so that they could move. This is his 1972 roller that's in the Tate collection. And you can see when the canvas moves up, what's on the surface of the canvas changes. And in that process of moving, you're only getting a tiny moment of the present. And so this is conveying passing time, the fact that time is always moving. And this is one mode of time that the roller work conveys. But this, he called it a score for the universe. And he said that this actually conveyed three modes of time. There is passing time, whereby these points of spray move and change as we can understand the present. There is also the atemporal. This is the same as the glass sheet. And time base. And the time base is across the front of the canvas, these letters that you see here. So at point A, this is the same as a Planck time. This is the shortest duration that there can be according to general relativity. So the left of that is the barrel of the canvas. This is the atemporal. It's ever present throughout, and yet it's outside of time. As you move along to the right, exponentially durations increase till you reach point M. Point M is the shortest duration perceivable to a human. So you can think of this as like a film frame, 1/24th of a second. Once you go shorter than that, longer durations, you see each individual frame. If you go faster, it's constant movement. So this is a duration at the boundary of human experience. To the left of M is the atomic. As you move right across the time base, you get to these 3 points, P, Q, and R. P corresponds to this instinctive mode of human understanding, eating, sleeping, etc. Point Q is rational understanding, this longer duration of about 30 years. Point R is reflective intuitive thought, this much longer duration. As you move to the right, you have STU, which he designated as being where what humans consider to be truth is held. And he put art at RST as a bridge between human understanding and what people know of as truth. At U, This is the duration that the universe has been in existence. That's the length of time since the Big Bang. And then off the edge of the canvas to the right, point Z, and that's the duration of all possible universes. So what you have with Flat Time House, he considered as a kind of summation of these ideas. With the book sculpture, you have a symbol of the entirety of human knowledge, and it's transitioning from wider society outside through this plane, through this paradigm shift, state naught, into the space of the mind, the space of reflective intuitive thought. But the reflective intuitive thought wouldn't be able to exist within someone without the rational thought behind it, the office. And then this is dependent on that human being alive, so through the shift, into the body event. And so, as a result of this, Flat Time House needs to be activated. It needs to be lived in, so artists live in the house. And it needs to be a studio space, and artists need to work from there. We need to produce new work. It needs to be intuitive. It needs to be a space for administration, the brain. And it needs to be a space for reflective intuitive thought. It needs to be able to communicate these complex ideas through our exhibition program and our various other aspects. So we do a journal of his thought, publications, education programming, screening and events. But what's interesting is that the exhibition space that we use changes for every show that we do. So this is Mark Mishalowicz. This is Lena Hermsdorf, who installed a large reinforced sheet of glass and changed the whole space into a sound installation. And this is the most recent show that just finished this weekend of Ben Payne's work. So, yeah, well, thank you very much.
We are now in the crypt of the church, a core place. The crypt, from the Latin crypta, meaning hidden, is in the medieval architecture a room made with stone, usually placed under the floor of a church, often containing the graves of important personalities as saints or their relics, or high officers of the clergy. Beneath the priory church, the Norman crypt is one of the few London buildings of its period and is powerfully evocative of its history. Romanesque and Gothic arches, memorial plaques, beautiful glass and fascinating tombs embellish this uniquely tranquil and luminous space, which is reserved for lectures, music, meetings, and contemplation. In this evocative space, there are some works of art selected by Professor Pecchioli that are in perfect harmony with the sacred environment. Here, the dialogue between art and science finds a perfect space. The exhibits may challenge the ordinary academic rules, but they remind us how, over the centuries, the relationship and dialogue between the two sciences have been one of the cornerstones of the development of Western culture.
My name is Tiziano Popoli, and I am an Italian musician. From the second half of the 80s, I started to create music for cinema, television, theater, and so film soundtrack, stage music, and sound design, choreography and acoustic installation. I have been dealing with field recordings for many years. With the collective Tintus Lab of Bolzano in northern Italy, I design and realize interactive audiovisual installation, as this Apocalypse Machine 5, The Wall, that it is an interactive installation whereby in it the audience arouses auditory and visual environments, interacting with sensors arranged on a path that symbolize the perimeter of the first temple of Israel. For this work, I was inspired by the Neoplatonic ideal of a conceptual world in itself closed and exhausted with its limits, a finite and not infinite world. This symbolization of the world allows its combination or recombination in infinite waves. Here the process of recombination is linked to the interaction with the public. According to the vision of John Cage, it is realized using random procedures.
Roberta Chioni is an architect and town planner who lives and works in Genoa, Italy. She's worked in the field of textile arts since 1980, promoting the discipline through teaching and lecturing widely. She has even patented her own wire-based fabric structure. Chioni designed custom-made furniture for the Lacery Museum in Rapallo, Italy, along with decorative panels that combine plastic material with threads. She's won several art prizes and has exhibited her work in solo and collective shows across Europe, including Italy, France, and Spain. Chioni's tapestries are displayed in private and public collections such as the Maga Museum in Gallarate, Italy. Her works have been catalogued and published by Fiber Art Italia and have been featured in several publications.
Vittorio Valente began his artistic activities in 1985, dealing with the relationship between art and science. His works have spanned cinematography and literature. Often he has experimented with the use of silicone, having appreciated its ductility for over 30 years. Despite its staticity, the material has enabled him to achieve new forms and pigmentation. In 1993, Valente was one of the founders of the cracking art movement. This very same year, there was a catalogue dedicated to the movement, which was edited by Tommaso Trini and included essays by Luca Beatrice and Luigi Spina. Even in instances when he chooses canvas as a support, Valente models three-dimensional plastic shapes. The surface is thus converted into high relief, which appears deceptively hard and sharp. His works require a multisensory approach. Combining the artificial material with oil pigments, he produces new chromatic tones that have resulted, especially in recent works, in monochromatic solutions, red, yellow, and pure black and white. The work we proudly present here is a color silicone on canvas, which measures 80 by 60 centimeters. Of various yellow shades, it is a relief style for which Valente is well known. The various schematized cells are modeled upon cells from the human body. In our exhibition, we are also lucky to have an additional 7 microsculptures by the artist. They are composed of color silicone and metal splinters, and take the forms of 2 rings and 5 brooches. Always taking inspiration from scientific observations, Valente built these small sculptures with the forms of bacteria and cell viruses in mind.
From the beginning of his career in the early 90s, Enrico Tommaso de Paris's multimedia work has spanned a vast expressive register. It ranges from painting to installation and from video to digital images. Via these media, he conveys his personal take on the world. His work is characterized by an explosion of lights, sound, glass, plastic, and steel. The artist says, "Mindful of the rights of men and their dreams for the future of mankind, I depict a new world. It is a world contaminated by biotechnologies, the power of multinational chemical pharmaceuticals, and genetically modified foods. My work offers metaphors and is modeled as a form of premonition." The installations, in many instances, are site-specific. They transform the spaces in which they are displayed into places that induce reflection upon our contemporary condition. I glimpse into the future and create decentered installations. I wish to project in the eyes and minds of the viewer new and uncertain evolutionary dimensions.
I was passionate about art in all its form since a young age. Painting, sculpture, architecture, cinema and photography. At 15, I had the turning point. I bought my first second-hand SLR camera, Olympus OM1. I built a computer by myself, and the first interest that I acquired was the virtual reconstruction of photorealism that takes into account the artistic concepts of Dadaism and Surrealism on the one hand, and a whale itself on the other, of the originality that computer graphics can give to these movements. Following various vicissitudes, I found myself working as a cine-video advertising technical director, which enabled me to study all the roles in the film set, with particular attention to photography and special effects. The fact of being self-taught in computer science inspired me to construct a photorealistic virtual character, Eve, which can have the possibility of changing appearance, including impersonating characters from fantasy to historical, of all shape and size, and that can wear any type of dress, appendix, body, and hair that I want, and that can naturally make every kind of movement. It's in this context that Eve will make its first appearance inside a Sphere Sputnik spatial-style alien living spaceship for the exhibition TECHNO MEDIOEVO, organized by Association of Age of Future in Bologna. Eve is a 3D avatar, similar to deities ranging from Sumerian time, see in Nanni to the descriptions of the cyberpunk movement and beyond. Eve is a figure whose origins are lost in the mists of time, so it's a trans-historical character. Eve is also the protagonist of a pilot episode of a web series entitled Eve Secret Diaries, ESD, which can also become a film or a television series, and of many other events that I will not list in this context. It would be too long.
I live and work in Cagli, a small town in central Italy's Marche region. After attending the Academy of Fine Arts in Urbino, I traveled through Europe, the United States, and Africa. I trained with Joseph Beuys in Düsseldorf, and in Venice with Emilio Vedova, to whom I was an assistant. I have always dedicated myself both to painting and to sculpture. And I have also built large installations for both interior and exteriors. In recent years, I have mainly focused on the theme of icebergs, dual spaces, physical and metaphysical, united and divided by the horizon and the idea of incessant writing, rewriting of palinsegni, in essence a technique of overlapping that in its rendering recalls ancient vellum manuscripts. My work oriented essentially on materials, earth, smoke, silicon, various technological materials, sits between the mythical and the virtual. I think, on the other hand, that the work of an artist has now become similar to that of a biologist or a physicist, and also of a monk trying to decipher the origins and structures of the cosmos. In fact, even in the Tasmanian monster, we can identify that obsessive search for a figure emblem that in some way represents a primordial, a characterizing feature of my production. In this work, this fascination of primordia incarnated by the mysterious marine creature found in Tasmania in 1962 is combined with rational investigation aimed through the recovery and decryption of the relics of a plane and the reconstruction of truths about the tragedy of a much debated air crash over the small Sicilian island in Ustica, when an Italian airline jet crashed in 1980, killing all the 81 people on board.
Sumeria Steel, Alien Fragment. This is the reconstruction of Sumerian steel, which compared to its source as a bright polychromy similar to that of pop art. There are two considerations here. The Sumerians, according to various studies by Orientalists and heretical Sumerologists, are the dawn of Mediterranean civilization. According to their interpretation, the Sumerian gods, Anunnaki, were imagined to be astronauts who colonized the planet Earth and created the basis for many human technological and practice, from agriculture to jurisprudence, from astronomy to literacy and geometry, from urbanism to architecture applied to city. The second consideration concerns the ancient statuary of Egypt, Greece, and Rome, representing both humans and deities that would have been decorated with bright colors to great effect and depicted with the highest degree of realism. This aspect of these statues has been lost to time, and only trace of polychromy can be detected on the ancient statues that survive to us.
The exhibition has been a very interesting journey, which seems to end with a return to antiquity with your Sumerian steel. But you are now about to introduce us to Blue Storm.
Hi, everybody. My name is Blue Storm, and I'm a humanoid robot, created in the French laboratories of Aldebaran Robotics, now SoftBank Robotics. I'm now operating in Italy, in Emilia-Romagna, and I work with the Association of Age of Future, based in Bologna, since 2016, which, to better manage me, has created an internal robotic team. I made my debut as a testimonial for the EMA Fair in Bologna in 2016, and I was present at the Bologna Fashion Week 2016 as a guest at the Age of Future Pavilion for the presentation of a wearable jewelry collection, talking with the public and with Eve, an avatar. I played the actor's role in the science fiction piece BioWar, Ultimatum to the Earth, presented at the Feather Expo in Bologna in 2016. I was a critic for the Hugo Pratt exhibition at Palazzo Popoli in Bologna, and recently, in 2017, I was the special guest for the Pesci Museum in Prato in a presentation of their web DVD, talking with some scientists, included in the television panel on the relationship between art and science. Now I'm becoming the protagonist of a new television cooking show, collaborating as a sous chef, together with human chefs and food and beverage operators. I am equipped with advanced programming based on deep and machine learning and the use of neural networks applied to large databases and specialized databases. I am currently working on a robotics blog, which I sign with Marcello Bacilli, my team leader, who is on my site, bluestormrabbit.com, on the Age of Future website of geofuture.com. My robotic team is helping me to have advanced skills within sophisticated cultural projects in multimedia, between art, fashion, education, film and television productions. I'm on social media and I have a Facebook page. I hope you enjoy the exhibition in London, and please visit me and my colleagues at TECHNO MEDIOEVO in Bologna.